Okay, good morning, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about tenant side rentals and what the process is when you have someone that is looking to rent an apartment. Again, this is one of the, I would say, easiest ins and easiest ways to get started in working in rentals. Similar to when we're talking about sales, it's a lot easier to work with a buyer because it's a little bit more about helping them make a decision versus having a property to rent or to sell. And so we tend to find that most of the time our agents will start off repping the tenant and working with the tenant on the rental process. So we're going to go over what the process looks like from start to finish and how you can kind of best utilize your tools and resources to be an asset and to be a resource to someone who is looking for a rental. One of the important things to remember is that every building in New York has a rental, or every building can have a rental in it. Across New York City, and again, the same thing applies to New York State if you're working outside of the city, there are kind of three classes of residential buildings. One is what we would call a residential building. They're also sometimes referred to as mixed-use buildings. That's a building where either the entire building is rentals, maybe the ground floor is a commercial space and everything above that is a rental. Those buildings tend to be owned by one person, one family, one management company, or one group of individuals. And they usually have someone associated with leasing out the units. Again, this can vary from, Eunice and Stephanie have a building at 232 East 12th Street. It's about a 60 unit building that they do the rentals in. Voss works on some buildings in Midtown that are like 600 units per building. Again, I have two townhouses in Murray Hill that are like 8 units per building. Those are rental buildings, right? And those rental buildings tend to be the quickest for approval because the only approval that you have to go through is the landlord, the owner, or the management company. Another class of buildings that have rentals in them are condos, right? In a condo, each unit is individually owned by someone, and they almost always have the right to rent out that apartment. The building usually sets some limitations to the rentals. Again, in the case of condos, most require a 12-month rental period, right? They're discouraging short-term rentals and things like that. Some buildings do allow shorter-term rentals, but generally they want a 1-year lease. And in the case of a condo, there's two forms of approval, right? There's going to be the approval for the lease of the owner, and there's also going to be the approval of the building for the tenant as well. In the case of a condo, that board approval is a rubber stamp, right? As long as you supply everything that they need, the only thing that the condo has is the right of first refusal to take that rental. And I've never heard of them exerting their right of first refusal on a rental. The only reason they might do it is if the terms are really bad, like, they're trying to rent an apartment for $100 a month to someone, the condo might say, you know what, we're going to rent that for $100 a month. In the case of a co-op, again, individual units and things like that, there are rental units in cooperatives oftentimes, and those are units where the shareholder is renting out their apartment, or the sponsor, who's the person who turned the building from a rental building into a co-op, might have some rental units in the building still, formerly rent stabilized, rent controlled, unsold units that they rent out. And oftentimes those units don't have to go through board approval, but most of the time an individual owner will have to go through board approval. Usually there's an interview for co-op rentals, and usually that process takes a little bit longer. And again, the reason that I want to point these three differences out are that, again, rental buildings tend to be the quickest approval, condos tend to take a little bit longer, and co-ops tend to take up to a month for the rental. So if you're working with someone and let's say your cousin says, hey, I'm looking for a rental in New York, Toby, I need to move next week, you really only want to be looking at rental buildings. And in OLR, you can kind of segregate between those those three different classes of properties and things like that. The next thing to bring up is that there are 3 different types of listings in New York. Again, an exclusive listing is a listing where the owner or the management company has entered into an agreement with an agent or a firm and given only that firm the ability to advertise their rentals, right? Usually there are co-brokes that happen. So again, you can bring a tenant to one of those exclusive listings. But if you are, marketing on some of our third-party marketing platforms, you cannot advertise the exclusive listing of someone else. Limited listings are kind of a little bit of a step in the more open direction. Usually that's a building where maybe the owner or the management company allows 1 or 2 or 10 brokerage firms to advertise it, but it's not really on the market for everyone to look at or to advertise. And an open listing is kind of the most general and the broadest one, right? These tend to be a lot of the larger management companies, TF Cornerstone, Rockrose, Glenwood, Brodsky. These are usually open listings where anyone can go in, and many times even a client can go directly to the management company to rent that apartment, right? So again, we always want to remember that there can be rentals in a rental building, in a condo, in a co-op. There are exclusive listings where one person or one agency has the right to rent that apartment. Limited listings where maybe, Weichert and 1 or 2 other firms have the right to advertise that apartment and to rent it out. Or open listings where anyone can rent out that apartment. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go over the rental process for when you have a tenant, right? And maybe this lead came to you from the Weichert rental network. Maybe this lead came to you from a family, a friend, a past client, wherever they came from, right? And what I'm going over is my best practices for when I have someone who is looking to rent an apartment, right? We're going to go through the steps, what it looks like, and how to kind of successfully go from getting a client that wants to work with you to actually closing on them and being paid. So the first step, and the most important one to me, is always doing some sort of consultation, right? You want to make sure that they understand the process of working with you and what the role of a real estate agent is. You want to make sure that they have their documentation together so that they're prepared, especially in a rental market like the one that we have right now. Apartments are going first day on the market, right? And so if you take someone out, let's say you see 5 apartments with them and they want to apply for something and they don't have their rental package together, most likely they will not get that apartment, right? And so preparation is really key in this. And we're going to go over what the list of usually required documentation is, so your clients can be prepared in advance when they're ready to go and look at apartments. You're also going to have them sign the required forms, right? That's the tenant registration and fee agreement, which we'll go over, the agency disclosure form, as well as the fair housing disclosure. Some landlords are requiring COVID forms again. More often than not, they're not, but I just left that on here just so you know that sometimes, and again, it's always good to defer to the listing agent because they will be the ones telling you what you need or what you need to do or prepare in order to show the apartment. And again, COVID forms sometimes can be still required. So this is a general list of, I would say, quote unquote, standard documentation that many landlords and owners ask for. Again, this is a list of things that when I have a exclusive rental, this is what my landlords usually ask for, right? It's an application. And again, we have a sample of our Weichert application. That's not to say that every landlord will take our application. Many of them have their own, but at least you have an example of the kinds of documentation and questions that the application will have. They'll also need an employment letter, right? That has to be on company letterhead with their salary, position, length of employment, any discretionary bonus that they received or are receiving, and that should be signed by HR or a boss. Again, if they're just getting a job, oftentimes landlords will take the offer letter, but if they've been working there for some time, they do need to request this. And oftentimes it takes a day or 2 to get this. And that's why letting your rental clients know, hey, you're going to need an employment verification letter in advance means that you'll have it before you actually take them out. 2 to 3 recent pay stubs. Most people do direct deposit, but ADP or whatever payment system they have, you can get kind of a printout of what that looks like. Tax returns, usually the most recent 1 to 2 years of taxes, especially if they're self-employed. There are 2 to 3 most recent bank statements, any investment statements, right? You always want to help people put themselves in the best light. And maybe if they don't make a ton of money, but they have a lot of money in the bank, a landlord will look favorably on that, right? So including a recent investment statement will be important. A copy of their photo ID, that's usually used to check to make sure signatures match. And there's often a credit check or application fee. For rental buildings, that's a maximum of $20. For co-ops and condos, that can be higher if it's charged by the management company. And so I always, again, I go over this with my clients before I take them out, tell them this is usually what a landlord's going to need. Some landlords ask for different documentation, maybe a landlord reference letter, maybe some other kinds of documentation, but this tends to be the quote unquote standard New York package. One thing to think about too is qualification guidelines. It's something that's a little bit different here in New York than in other places, but most of the time a landlord wants to see that the applicants for an apartment make 40 times the monthly rent in order to qualify for the apartment. So if it's a $2,000 a month apartment, the traditional method is that the landlord wants to see that that person makes $80,000 a year. Again, if it's a couple, they will usually combine their two incomes and things like that. But when someone asks, oh, hey, what can I afford in the city? This is a great way to do it, right? If they say, oh, I make 120,000, then you should really be looking at apartments up to about $3,000 a month. Again, there's some fungibility here. Some landlords are looking at 35 times, but generally the rule of thumb is that they want to make 40 times the monthly rent to qualify for the apartment. So what I also do is I send an email, right? I will do this kind of general consultation over the phone, going over the process of finding an apartment, the documentation that's required, and what it's like to work with me. Again, I summarize this by sending this form email to my client afterwards to make sure that we have everything in writing and so they understand what's going on, right? And so again, this is exactly verbatim what I send. I just want to send over a list of documentation that most landlords use, as well as a sample of our company rental application. I ask that you complete the packet documentation so we have it together as a PDF that we can give to any landlord. Most agents will ask me for a general financial picture as well, so we ask for this up front, right? Employment letter, tax returns, bank statements, photo ID and stuff like that. And then I go over the brokerage fee, right? The brokerage fee varies from apartment to apartment. Some landlords pay my fee. If one is paid by the tenant, it usually ranges from 1 month to 15% of a year's rent. Again, letting people know what the fee is and what it can allow you to have conversations now before you take your time and show people apartments that have a different fee that they're not comfortable paying, right? Again, there are 3 different levels of fees, I would say. The first is what we would call a OP apartment. As a broker, it's called an OP apartment. And this is where the landlord is paying Weichert Properties a fee, usually within 2 months of renting the apartment, to us for bringing the tenant, right? In the case of an OP, we don't have to charge the tenant anything. Some landlords are what we would call no fee apartments, right? That means that if the consumer goes directly to the apartment, they don't have to pay a fee. If they're working with us, they would be paying us a 1-month fee for helping them through the rental process, right? And so those listings that you see, let's say on StreetEasy that say no fee, those aren't necessarily ones where we are being paid. And so it's important to always find out and to ask, and we'll get to this a little bit later, who is paying the fee, or if there is an OP, an owner pays, to Weichert for bringing the tenant, right? So again, if we see something where on OLR it says collect your own fee, or online it says no fee apartment, that could mean that we need to charge your tenant a 1-month fee to cover your time and energy to help them in the process. And the most extreme case is the 15% apartments, right? These tend to be smaller buildings, ones where there is an exclusive listing agent. And what happens is that they will set the fee, right? And so they're setting that it's a 15% fee, but because they're part of the board, they're going to split that fee with us, right? And so that means that your client, the tenant, is paying a 15% fee, which is about 1.8 months for renting the apartment. 7.5% goes to the listing agent, 7.5% goes to us as the tenant's agent, right? And so you'll see these apartments on OLR as either 15% fees or 7.5% fees, but it means the exact same thing, right? It means that the tenant is paying a fee, it's 15% of a year's rent, and half goes to us and half goes to the listing agent. To continue on with this letter, landlords will require the first month's rent, security deposit, and brokerage fee, right? And the security deposit should be 1 month, no more than that. In some cases less than that, but usually it's 1 month. And the brokerage fee at lease signing. These will have to be certified checks or wire transfer, but rent can be paid by personal check or direct deposit after you move in, right? And again, I go over all of this on a phone call, a Zoom, a FaceTime with my client, or in person if I can meet with them. I have them sign the forms at that point, and then I follow up with this email, right? So then we have it not only verbally, but in writing what's going on, right? And again, having this conversation about the fee up front is very important, because the worst thing that you can do is run around with someone for a day or two, find something that's great, there's a 15% fee, and they're like, I can't afford that, right? And so making sure, and again, after sending this, sometimes you say, hey, I really can't pay 15%. I'm willing to look at things up to a 1 month fee. Great, right? You can only send over options where it'd be a 1 month fee, right? And this helps you, again, build the relationship of trust between yourself and your client. So again, once you've gathered the documentation, stuff like that, you want to get the disclosure signed. You can use the criteria that your client said, right? The biggest things are, what neighborhood do you want to live in? What's your target price point? Size, amenities, right? Is it a doorman building? Is it a not doorman building? And what you can do is you can use their criteria to set up showings, right? We'll go over how to do some quick rental searches in StreetEasy and on OLR in a moment. But again, brokers often ask for information on your client, right? That's fine. They want to make sure that you know who you're taking out and that they're not wasting their time because the person might not be qualified for this landlord. Again, rental brokers can be extremely flaky. We want to make sure that we're changing that stereotype and being really upfront with people, with helping them through the process. And again, at your first appointment or before you take them out via DocuSign, you should have the tenant registration and fee agreement, the agency disclosure form, and the fair housing form signed by your tenants. One big thing, especially let's say you're working with a share situation or roommates, there's 2 people, there's 3 people, you want to get everyone on the same page, because the worst thing that you can do is spend a lot of time working with one person where the other 2 people are running around with other brokers, right? And so if you do have this, make sure that you're meeting everyone, you've got the contact information, names of everyone, so that you can register them before you actually go to the showings. So again, the next part's the viewing apartments. This is the fun part. Again, you can find apartments on a bunch of different sources. In New York City, OLR, StreetEasy, Realtor.com, Apartments.com, and RentHop are all great places to look for apartments. We'll look at OLR and StreetEasy in a moment. Outside of New York, you can look on Zillow and Realtor.com to find apartments. Apartments.com, whatever MLSs that you're on. So again, if you're working in Queens, there are rentals on LIBOR. If you're working in Westchester, there are rentals on HGAR through One Key and stuff like that. And again, I'm just going to do a quick aside here and show you how we can do a rental search very quickly, right? So if you're logged into online residential, we'll go up here to search. We'll go to listings. We'll pick our borough. So let's say we're looking in Manhattan, and we want to click on rentals here. So in OLR, the only things that you need to put in are a price range, a size, and a neighborhood, right? So let's say your client's looking in Greenwich Village between 3,000. And again, in this case, I'm going to put a little under. So let's put 2,800 to 4,000. I'm going to go a little bit over and put 4,200 for a 1 bedroom, right? So I'm just going to change those. That's all I need to do a search, right? So I'm going to click run search here. And there's 14 apartments, right? 83 Washington Place, 218 Thompson, there's a bunch of them here, right? So the great thing about this is we get some information just on this search page, right? 1 bedroom, 4,200, washer dryer, exposed brick, recessed lighting. This sounds great. 4th floor walk up. Commission. This says 7.5% to outside broker, right? So that means that this is a apartment that we are going to be charging a 15% fee on to our tenant. 7.5% is going to Corcoran and 7.5% is going to Weicker, right? Down here, 218 Thompson Street, it says commission, collect your own fee, right? That means that Real New York, the listing agent, is being paid by the owner, and Weicker would collect a fee from the tenant. And again, in these situations, you can charge a 1 month fee to them, or you can charge up to 15%. Again, exclusive, bond, doesn't say the amount, but usually that's assumed to be 15% of a year's rent. You can always ask the agent, and that's one of the biggest things when you're working with a tenant, right? All of your questions want to be deferred to the listing agent on anything to do with the property. So if you're saying, what's the fee? You ask Ida, right? You call Ida, you say, hey, Ida, my client's interested in 128 McDougal Street. Just wanted to see if this is a 15% co-broke or what the fee is like. And they'll give you information. Scroll down. Again, commission 1 month, 50/50 co-broke. Again, I would ask Jean, again, give her a call. Hey, just want to confirm what that is. Is it a 1 month fee to the tenant? Is it a 1 month fee to, to someone else? These are mostly open and collect your own fee. Again, this one open, that means it's a collect your own fee. We'd be charging 1 month to the tenant for that rental. The same thing can be done on StreetEasy here. Right, we're going to rentals. Let's say we're looking on in Greenwich Village. We want to find 2,800 to 3,800. 1 bedrooms, and let's see what we have. 12 apartments, right? And again, there's going to be some differences between them. Again, so in this case, right, Time Equities is listing this, and this says no fee. So if you bring your client to that property, you are charging them a 1 month fee for it, right? And so that's where there's a little bit of a difference between an OP apartment where the owner is paying us and a no fee apartment. And no fee always refers to if a tenant is going directly to that person, right? So again, this one you're getting some free rent on. Again, this one's a no fee. This one's a fee apartment because it doesn't say no fee. But again, if you're bringing a tenant to see this apartment, and this one's across the street from my apartment, actually. If you're bringing your client to see this apartment, then you need to charge them a fee, right? So this would be a 1 month fee apartment because AD Real Estate Investors is not paying our fee. Again, it's no fee to the consumer who goes directly to the listing agent. So just make sure that you're understanding that kind of discrepancy. And again, if you have any questions, you can call Daniel, give him a call, set up an appointment. Again, everything on these apartments, because these are the listings of a management company or the listings of another broker, you have to defer all questions about access, how you get in, how you show it. Again, most of the time you're going to set up an appointment with them, but you can call out, set up the appointment, and show your clients these apartments. I'm going to go back to the presentation now, but that's kind of a general way of doing searches. So again, for the showings, you want to be on time. Don't talk too much, right? It's really about the client getting a sense of the space. You want to know the answers to common questions, right? Anything about the building or the apartment, usually the listing agent, the person showing it to you and your client will be able to answer, but know where the closest subway stop is, city bike, transportation, if it's a ferry nearby, grocery stores, amenities, right? Be able to talk about things, great restaurants in the neighborhood. Always get the client's reaction. Usually we're showing 3 or 4 apartments in a row. While you're walking between apartments, you can say, oh, what did you think about that one? Oh yeah, it was a great view, whatever. And always follow up with the broker or the management company with feedback, right? I always send a thank you. Again, let's say we showed 4 apartments. When I get back to my desk, I send a thank you to everyone. Hey, thanks so much for the showing. Unfortunately, it was too small for Joe. I'll keep it in mind for other clients, period, right? That's going to differentiate you as an agent from other people who just show an apartment and don't ever say anything ever again, right? Don't be transactional, right? Be relational and start building up relationships with some of these management companies. Some of our most successful rental agents, like Voss, like Christine, they've built up a relationship so far that they actually get listings before they're on the market from some of the management companies. And the reason they do that is because they're nice, they follow up with the people, and they did rentals in the building. And so always give any feedback that you have or the client has. Great apartment, unfortunately, it's a little too expensive. Great apartment, unfortunately, the bedroom's a little too small. Keep it in mind for other people. And again, start building that relationship with other agents at other companies, as well as with management companies and things like that. So once you find an apartment that they like, what you want to do is you want to defer to the listing agent or management company for their application requirements. At the beginning of the presentation, we talked about the general New York requirements, but every management, every company, every landlord probably has something a little bit different. Many of them will take that kind of standard package that we went over before. They might even take our application. Other times they want you to use their application and provide a certain specific set of documentation. Some use portals like OnSite to do the online application and things like that. Great, they'll give you the link. I oftentimes, especially if it looks like this is going to be a great match for my client, I always ask for the applications before I take the clients out, right? That way, if we see something and they want to apply, we have everything, right? We don't have to wait for them to get back to us. We don't have to wait for something. Many of the big management companies have the applications on their website. Always just get the most recent version in advance. Again, if you're doing a co-broke with, let's say, a brand X company like Corcoran, like Spire or something like that, you can ask them for their application if that's going to be what you're going to need, and that way you can have the client fill it out as soon as they're ready to apply for it. Again, you should already have all the documentation, the general documentation together, so you can send it over right away. And again, in a rental market like we're having now, where things are going to the first or second person who sees it, the difference between having your package together and getting it in and not having your package together is the difference between your client getting the apartment and not, right? And so that little preparation step before you take someone out will help you do more deals. Let me be very clear about that. There's usually a credit check, as I mentioned. Most of the time, the listing agent or management company will run it. If they need us to run one, we can do it. We collect $20 cash or certified check, and they need to complete our application. You send that to Patty, the processor. And again, if you need this, just let me know. I'll give you her information, and she'll run it pretty quickly. Mondays 9 to 5, basically, she can run it. Let her know that you've sent it to her, and that way you can get it back and send over the credit check to the other agent. So let's say they apply, they get approved, right? The next step is lease signing. And again, the reason that I tell people during our consultation that they're going to need first month's rent, security deposit, and any fee up front is because once you're approved, the general expectations are that leases will be signed the next day, right? That's how quickly things tend to move in New York. If not, it's usually within a day or two. But most of the time, again, if someone has an application, they're approved, they're signing the next day. And so our job is usually not, unless it's our listing, to put the leases together, but it's to be a resource for our clients if they have questions about the leases, right? Most of the time, lease terms are fixed. You can't really change anything. They're very standard. The one really good thing when you're working with a tenant is you can remind them that New York law is 99% of the time on the side of the tenant. And landlord-tenant courts almost always rule in favor of the tenant, right? And so they're more protected than they probably think they are. You can review the terms, right? Make sure their name's right, the move-in date, the move-out date, if they're getting a free month, if that's in there. And again, just as a reminder, there are a number of riders that are needed. These are always included in the management company ones, but sometimes other brokers forget them. But lead paint, bed bug, window guard, sprinkler, stove knob, right? There's 5 of them at this point that we need. There's probably more going down the line, but these are all needed in the lease. Again, the listing agent will be the one preparing the lease, presenting it. Again, you should go to the lease signing or help and be able to be present for when your client's signing it. Again, these days, many of them are sent over DocuSign or online, but they can usually at least help you, allow you to kind of read through it with them. Again, the next thing is payment and processing, right? When they sign the lease, that's when they give the checks, right? First month's rent, security deposit, and our brokerage fee. It's not the day after, it's when they're signing the leases that we collect everything. When you get the check, if they're paying it, or you can submit the paperwork and payment to me. We'll get that over to corporate and get you paid pretty quickly. Again, if you're not signed up for direct deposit under Money Matters, make sure you do that as quickly as possible. It takes about 5 days to process. So many times people are delayed in their payment of their first check because they didn't sign up for it. So go into Weichert 1, middle of the page, you can sign up for Money Matters and get your direct deposit linked. For us, what we need in order to process you or to help you prepare the invoice is the Weichert transaction form for rentals, right? It's a pretty self-explanatory form. We can go over it when you need help with it. That's in the Dropbox. The first and signature page of the lease, if you just have the full thing, you can forward that over. We'll just print out what we need. Agency disclosure form, fair housing disclosure form, and the check itself if we need it. Again, if you were showing multiple properties, we need the tenant registration and fee agreement. If you were only showing one property, then you don't have to have that one. After the deal, again, one of the most important things is once you close on one person, that's going to be your best source of business moving forward, right? So follow up with them. I always get my tenants a small gift, maybe a bottle of wine, maybe a keychain or something like that. Ask them, how did the move go, right? Add them into my Weichert so you can put them as a closed client. Ask them for a review. If you got them from RentHop, do it through RentHop. If you got them any other source, do it through Zillow. It will feed to my Weichert website. And again, these are people you should be in touch with, right? Put in your database when their lease is expiring. Put a reminder for 4 months before, right? Because oftentimes people rent one apartment and then they maybe enter a relationship, maybe they end a relationship, and they're going to move in a few months, right? Or within the year. So make sure that you're following up with them, right? I've had renters that I've rented to every year or two for the last 10 years, right? I've one guy I've rented 5 apartments to. Every 2 years, I follow up with him. Yep, looking to move again. Nope, not looking to move this year. Let's stay in touch. And again, eventually this client's going to buy, but these are great ways. And again, ask them for referrals. Hey, you had a great time working with me. If you have any friends or family looking to rent an apartment, let me know. And at the same time, tell them, hey, I also do sales. So if you decide that you want to buy something down the road, please let me know. I'm happy to help you in any way that I can. Again, just to go over the documentation and requirements, everything that we need from you is in the Google Drive, right? It should be shared with you. And if it's not, send me an email and I'll share the drive with you under Weichert Properties files. There's a rental package in there. And again, one form is the tenant registration and fee agreement. What this form states is, and this helps us get through our fair housing disclosures, right? That our fee, Weichert's fee, that we will collect on a rental for representing the tenant is up to 15% of a year's rent, right? We don't collect 16% ever, right? Our legal obligation is to have a set rate that we do not go above, and that's 15% at our office, right? That's our offices. But it could be less, right? And again, some people are hesitant to sign this because in here it says up to 15% of a year's rent. One thing that you can do is in the comment section, when you're filling this out as you take people out, you can put in there no fee apartment, right? If the owner's paying our fee, or 1 month fee apartment, right? And that way the client knows that for that apartment, this is the fee. For this apartment, this is the fee, right? And this helps you get together some information so that you can most easily take them out and help find a great apartment for them. The disclosure form, right? And again, the disclosure form allows people to know that you are representing them and representing their best interest, not the landlord's, right? So on the disclosure form, the form says this form is provided to me by blank. You'll write your name in there, right? And Weichert Properties are already on there, representing the tenant as tenant's agent, and that's it. Near the bottom under I/we, you write their name in, they sign it, date it, you're done. And that is good for every apartment that you're going to be showing them, right? The only exception comes up if you're showing them a Weichert exclusive, which we'll get into down the road. Don't worry about that for now. The anti-discrimination form, again, all it does is it tells people, hey, I could discriminate against you in your housing search. I'm not going to, but if you feel like you are discriminated against, here's the contact information of who you can go get in touch with. Again, this form is provided to me by, put your name in there, of Weichert Properties. On the I/we line, you write their name, they sign, date it, boom, you're good to go. You just have to provide it once when you first meet them, and you have it for everything else, right? And these forms can be sent over DocuSign. If you would like, I have these as templates in DocuSign that I can share with you. So all you have to do is put in the client's name and email address, and it will send it to them. They sign it, and then it's got your information in there. So if you would like that shared with you, please let me know and I will send that over to you as well. Just send me an email, hey, can you share with me the rental documentation forms? So that's basically it, right? The rental process is fairly straightforward. When we're representing a tenant, we're here to be a resource to them, to help them find an apartment, and to help them set up appointments and to get through the whole process with them. But it's really nice when you're starting in the business because most of the questions will be answered by the listing agent or the management company, right? Anything to do with lease terms, move-in process, documentation, that can all be asked to them. And so all you're there for is to help them find and search for a place. That is it for me with this presentation. I'm going to stop the share. I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you guys so much.